CCP being up for sale is all based on one news report that came out from Korean site MTN. We'll have a look at that in a second. So it's all based on one leak. They're a fairly reliable source, so it's probably there's probably some truth to it. What they're saying in their news report is that Pearl Abyss has reached out looking for a suitor, for a buyer for CCP Games, the makers of EVE Online, and that is big news because CCP is in the middle of releasing Vanguard. They're in the middle of releasing Frontier. So these are all things that are currently in production, and yet within this process, Pearl Abyss comes out and voluntarily or involuntarily leaks that they are looking for a buyer for CCP. Apparently, they've already gone out and held talks, etc., etc. So we want to discuss that today. What does that mean for CCP? What does that mean for EVE Online, for EVE Online's future, for the roadmap? And we're going to do all of that with Crod, who is my fellow EVE Online trader and finance aficionado. I'm going to label you, Crod. So, Crod, thanks for joining us on the show today. Let's start with a bit of a history. Crod, you have a blog, Markets for ISK, and so you have covered the history of that initial purchase of CCP by Pearl Abyss quite a few times, but maybe can you recap a little bit? I know they initially paid something like over 400 million, and then that was reduced based on performance later. But can you kind of wrap it up for us? What the history is, Crod?
Okay, really quickly. I mean, back in 2018, they paid 225 million and an extra 200 million if certain targets were met. Now, those targets were never met, so the extra 200 million was never paid. So they paid 225 million. Since then, CCP it's only been profitable 1 year. It's been loss making for all the other years. It's generated about, just looking at my notes, it's generated $56 million of losses. There's also been a $50 million write down. So while CCP has been under Pearl Abyss's ownership, it has cost them another 106 million. Really, that's the way to look at it.
Thanks.
And then more recently, I mean, the losses last year were 19 million, but the revenues were beginning to ramp up quite nicely. I mean, that's the one positive thing you can say.
Yeah, and the reason they're loss making, and we've covered this in previous videos also that we did together, Crod, but the big reason why they're loss making right now is because they have new titles in development, and that costs a lot of money. That is fairly usual in the game industry, that they will invest a lot of money into new titles and then reap the benefits when these titles come out. Now, we know from our own calculations that EVE Online on its own is very likely profitable. You know, our estimations, I think, differ a little bit in terms of how profitable, but I think we agree that EVE Online on its own is profitable. And so, what does this mean for EVE Online? If you're a new buyer coming in and you're looking at what CCP is doing and why Pearl Abyss is saying, then either you're looking at these new developments and you're saying, I see more in them than Pearl Abyss does, or you say, no, I agree, that's why I'm going to pay less and I'm going to shut all the new stuff down, right? I mean, those are the two likely scenarios that we see coming out of this, right, Crod?
Yeah, that's the only way they can make it work. I mean, as you sort of say, the lifeblood of these businesses is to launch new games, but the general idea is the profits from your existing games more than cover that. So you continue to make a profit every year, which, you know, CCP is just not doing at the moment. So yes, if somebody was looking at this to take it over, they would have to work out what is the profits of EVE Online itself. They'd use that as their sort of multiple, and then they would decide what do they want to do with everything else. Do they just want to shut it down to make this business profitable, or something else?
Yeah, if you're a buyer coming in We should also say there is a $50 million outstanding loan, I think, between CCP and Pearl Abyss, right? Have I got that right, Crod?
That's correct. It used to be a loan from a Korean bank, but then Pearl Abyss itself paid off that loan and made that loan between Pearl Abyss and CCP. So
Yeah,
yes,
so
it's a loan from Pearl Abyss to CCP, $50 million.
so that's another thing that might hamper the willingness of somebody to buy, or at least reduce the buy price, because that's something that is yeah, I guess debt that has to be considered. But overall, going into this, it's kind of interesting. Typically, if you're valuing a company, you're going to look at either their revenue or their profits and take a multiple of that, and then factor in what is a typical multiple for the industry, and that's an estimation for the purchase price that somebody might pay for it. In this case, so either you value revenue and you see a clear growth potential for the future, and you think that is how the company is going to turn profitable, because if you're looking at profits alone, a loss-making company, you're not going to pay a single dollar for it, right? Because you don't want to buy those losses. So whoever goes in, as I said earlier, is either going to shut the new stuff down and focus on EVE Online and make it even more profitable, or they believe in these in the new developments, especially EVE Frontier, which opens up another interesting question, because if you look at the list of potential companies that might buy, I mean, none of us really know, but certainly I think two names that I've seen mentioned a lot are Tencent and NetEase. Those are two Chinese giants that certainly have the cash and are active in MMOs, to want to dive in there. However, in China, crypto overall is seen very, very critical, and so one hurdle I would say to that is that, does it even work? Like a development like Frontier, does it even work if NetEase or Tencent are potential buyers, right?
No, that's correct. The Chinese gaming companies are desperate to expand outside of China, but yeah, the crypto would be a real block. And the trouble, obviously, with the crypto and CCP is it's kind of fundamental to the next project they're looking at. So it's not as if CCP could hive off the crypto side of it and say, look, we're now CCP X crypto. That wouldn't be so easy.
How do you like? I have trouble looking at the timing of this, right? If you're Pearl Abyss, you want to jack up the price. So I see no way where this is a good timing for them for this to be released, this news to come out, right? Crota, you went through their statements, and we had a discussion on this earlier. Um, like they haven't hinted at this before in any of the earnings releases or investor calls. There was no hint at this. So this coming out, as I said, is an obvious vote of no confidence towards the new project, which is in itself just going to hamper their efforts in finding a buyer. On the other side, if they're already out there holding talks, buyers already know that they want to sell. So is the news breaking? Does this even have any impact on the sale process, or is this just business as usual, Crota? Do you have a view on that?
Right. So the accounting rules are if CCP was actively up for sale before the accounts were drawn up, so that's around about mid-May, early May, then there'd have to be a lot of changes in the accounts. You'd have to sort of highlight this investment was for sale. A lot of the long-term debt would be short-term debt. That wasn't there, so no hard decision had clearly been taken then. Technically, I mean, Pearl Abyss has issued a denial that any decisions have been made, which is a non-denial if ever there was one. So they're clearly sort of offering CCP around, looking for interest. And I think what the leak to the Korean paper was, they've probably got some people in the frame, so they're just sort of throwing the ball out there. Just they don't want to miss everybody, so throw the ball out there. look for it. The reason why now is either they have lost confidence in CCP and they don't think they can get CCP to change direction. So, Hilmer might just have them over a barrel. Or Pearl Abyss themselves need some money quick. And they think the only asset they can monetize is CCP, EVE Online.
If we're talking about potential buyers there, I mean the Chinese are one. Apparently there is some Saudi fund that is buying up a lot of Western gaming companies as well. I forget its name, but I'll look it up for you guys. One other opportunity would be for venture capitalists. Like, I mean, they already collected 40 million from Andreessen Horowitz. There seems to be some interest in blockchain gaming. There seems to be interest in CCP. Andreessen Horowitz has some confidence into Hilmar, obviously, or they wouldn't have invested 40 million. Do you see a VC fund like that as a potential buyer? Does that happen, Crod?
That I have to say I don't know. I mean, A16Z will be a bit worried because obviously if CCP disappears, so does their investment. Private equity, I suppose, could. They would be just as aggressive as anybody else in working out which of the projects are going to work and which are not, and closing things down. But I honestly, I don't really have a hard view there.
Yeah, I think it's a very risky. If you're looking at risk, video games, whether video games work or not, especially completely new and quote unquote innovative projects like Frontier, whether they work is already a huge risk, right? And in this case, I think it's a clear case of Pearl Abyss wanting to unload for either option 1 or 2 that you named earlier. So I think whoever takes it on has a pretty good position of negotiating that price down. And we made some calculations earlier, Crod, but the sale price is not going to be anywhere near what Pearl Abyss paid for CCP, right? I mean, never mind the 400 million they initially paid, but even the 200 they ended up paying, or they were initially going to pay, even the 200 million that they ended up paying, I think they can be lucky if they get 100 million for CCP now, because they're loss making and there's a lot of risk involved, right? What do you think about the purchase price?
Well, okay, so they paid 200 million and they've written 50 off already. So they're down at 150k. So this is where we've got to start to think about how does it work in the market. Most people will use what's called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, of which last year CCP, or Pearl Abyss Iceland technically, but CCP made a loss of about 12 million. We then sort of think, well, okay, that's ridiculous. Let's just think, what can EVE Online do? And EVE Online did revenues of about $55 or $60 million. And then the big question is, what are the profits? What's the profit margin, the EBITDA margin? Now, we sort of think if it's 10%, that's probably at the low end, then that means they make 6 million, say, profits. The multiples that's going these days is 25 times. So multiply 6 by 25. If somebody can do that quickly, that'd be great. 150. And then, so they pay 150 for it, but then a 50 of that goes straight to Pearl Abyss to pay off the debt. So it's really 100 million that they'd be paying for it.
Yeah. So and then that's them getting lucky, right? I mean,
well, that's them. That's of course them paying for EVE Online. They then have to think, okay, do they adjust that for taking on the losses of the new projects, or are they going to go in there and just shut down these new projects? I don't know. Or maybe they're an established gaming company and they're going to use the developers who are on these new projects for their own projects. I don't know.
Yeah. I just looked it up, by the way. Savvy Games Group is the investor group from Saudi Arabia that is buying up a huge stakes in a lot of video game companies. So not sure if they're looking for prestige there. Mike, the gaming dad, says that they need to look at potential profits. Yeah, I mean, that's where I, as a buyer, I'm going to go in and I say I don't believe any of it to try to push the price down. But clearly, whoever buys it is going to be the one who believes that there is profit in the future. And I have been critical on this stream before that, in that I'm not per se against any of these new projects. I just think that Vanguard, I don't really see the path to a lot of incremental revenue there for Vanguard, being more or less an add-on to EVE Online in a incredibly competitive shooter environment, right? So I don't see Vanguard really pushing the needle there. The only thing you got to talk about is either Frontier, which is new, but it's going to be rather far off from, like, I don't know if what they have announced in terms of release date, but it's going to be rather far off for an actual release. There's going to be certainly probably some early release stuff, but for a full on release, that's going to be some time off and highly risky. And then we have all of the mobile stuff, right? And that Korean MTN website cites the CCP's inability to be successful in the mobile space as one of the big reasons for Pearl Abyss to wanting to sell them again, because they were hoping that in the mobile space they were going to do a lot more. Now, I know Nosy Gamer, he keeps writing me. We keep talking about the mobile revenues for Galaxy Conquest, which like sure, they might have been significant, but it's I don't see that as a long time really moneymaker. But who knows? It might be, but so mobile or Frontier is where it might be at. If you look at CCP's website, they're still looking for game design directors for Frontier and for one in Shanghai, so one of the mobile game, I guess Galaxy Conquest. So they're essentially looking for CCP Okami's position right now for Frontier, and then they're looking for it for Galaxy Conquest. So clearly, they're those are two projects that they're absolutely hiring for, and that shows you that, I mean, certainly most of CCP was blindsided by this news, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't keep trucking forward. Or do you see that as completely independent, Groda?
I'm going to say something terrible here, but Iceland is a small place. I think if it started to get within CCP, we'd know about it by now.
Yeah.
I may be completely sort of maligning the management of CCP with that statement, but I think CCP have been blindsided as well. I mean, FanFest wasn't too long ago. Something would have come out. On the EVE Frontier, there is a very good chance that A16Z could be financing most of it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be a project that would keep on going.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last earnings report. So the 40 million that A16Z invested. So A16Z is Andreessen Horowitz, by the way. What they invested, we think that's already been used up, right? So the development of Frontier so far has already used more than 40 million, I think, is what we arrived at. And the way that they structured that deal, it seems to be that they invested 40 million, and in return they got I think what we call EVE coin, the token that is going to be used in EVE Frontier. So clearly they're investing 40 million, and they are their fortunes are very much tied to the fortunes of EVE Frontier going forward. And so I think it's not unrealistic that they're going to play some role in these negotiations, whether it be as a potential suitor, or at least as somebody that's going to influence the price.
Yeah, I'd agree. Very hard to split up all the technology behind EVE Frontier versus EVE Online. And also, any buyer of CCP would want to know how much more A16Z is going to pump in to sort of keep EVE Frontier sort of running on its own, if you like.
Yeah. So let's, we are an EVE Online stream, and let's talk about the key question. So what does this mean for Eve Online? Like, is Eve dying? Is this good news? Is this bad news? I'll start, Croda, and my view is this: Eve Online is a profitable game with a 20 plus year history, right? Eve Online is the most valuable thing that CCP has right now. So whether Pearl Abyss finds a buyer or not, whatever the price is or not, I think Eve Online is the reason that CCP is where it is today. So I don't really see any path forward where somebody goes in and shuts down Eve Online, because it's the reason to buy CCP. And so the only question is, are they going to, are the new buyers, or are Pearl Abyss going to shut down new projects because they want to turn Eve profitable anyway, or as quickly as possible, or are they just going to um or are they just going to wait to see which of these projects actually work? But that requires a lot more investment going down the line, and I don't know who's going to be willing to put that up. So I think Eve is safe for now, but certainly whoever buys it, it's going to be a big impact on also the monetization policies in Eve Online, because we've seen shifts there as well already with Pearl Abyss coming in, and whoever buys it is going to want to squeeze their value out of Eve Online. What do you think, Rhoda?
Yeah, it makes no sense to close down Eve Online. I mean, let's assume it is profitable for a minute, which I'm sure it is. I think more recently, in the last let's call it 2 years, the revenue management process has become a lot more professional. And they put up the subs to everyone, not such a great idea. And now what they're doing is they're trying to sort of take dollars off people who can afford to. With all these out of game store sales. I think I know it's very common in a sales process. You start you hawk it around. You use an advisor, a broker, to hawk it around to the usual suspects. Once you're starting talking to a few, you then do what you did last week, and you let it be known to the rest of the gaming community that you are thinking about selling this. That gives everybody else a chance to come in. Now, when you are talking to people and they become serious, you literally show them everything. You sign an NDA, they look at the books, and let's say that doesn't go through. If that doesn't go through, then I think Pearl Abyss will sit down and think, gosh, what should we do ourselves? And I think we've got another write-off to come, because I don't think CCP in total is sort of making the profits that the Pearl Abyss expected. And therefore, that would suggest we've got a sort of a bit of a reorganization to come, where there'll be a bit more commercial about what projects are shut down. But the net effect is, Eve Online is clearly going to survive. Maybe we begin to see a more aggressive revenue management, where we get more of these sales, where they try and get more of the wallet of individual players.
Yeah. Let me take some questions from chat. So one of them is, could CCP buy themselves? So CCP doesn't have any cash, so they would have to borrow cash. So what they would do, what would be more realistic, is that Hilmar buys the company back. But I think Hilmar is rich, but I don't think he has the cash to buy the entire company back, if you ask me. Right.
Well, I
Correct.
mean, what he would do is what's called a management buyout.
Yeah.
Is the management themselves would go and get the finance based on a business plan, put their own money in so that they show they're serious, and then go from there. And bear in mind, they sold it for 200 million. They could probably buy it back for probably 150.
Yeah.
You've got that 50 to pay.
And it's not unrealistic for them to get help from the Icelandic government, right? Because the CCP is the pride of Iceland in a lot of ways, and so I think they would get very, very favorable, very, very, very favorable pricing. So I think like a group of investors around Hilmar is actually not an unrealistic solution to all of this. Like if they get good financing, if they put up some of their own capital as collateral, possibly that is a way forward. Possibly even with an A16Z involvement, right? I mean, Hilmar will already be in those talks right now.
Yeah, well, definitely for the last 3 days. Yeah.
CCP has a big role to play in the Icelandic economy, so I do think that this is not going to play out without Iceland having some sort of involvement in these discussions, be it actively or inactively. So somebody's also asking, would it even be allowed to shut down Eve while there's paid services running? So I mean, nobody would shut down Eve overnight. I think there's no obligation. I'm pretty sure in the terms and conditions you forfeit all your rights when you buy something, but clearly they would just stop selling Omega, stop selling Plex, and then shut it down the road. Those things take time. But as I said, I think shutting down Eve is a very, very, very unlikely scenario because it's the only thing that is currently profitable about this whole thing, and so you wouldn't come in, buy CCP, and shut down Eve. The only way I see that happening is if somehow Pearl Abyss wanted to shut down CCP altogether, and that would just not work. Even in that scenario, I think a group of people would come out and buy Eve Online, Eve Online's IP and etc. to keep it running. Like I don't see any scenario where Eve Online is not continue to run. Bonsai, yeah. Hey, good to see you, man. CCP is up for sale. That's right. All right. Any other questions from chat or anything I forgot, Crod, that we talked about?
Well, the final thing I'll say is we might finally get to see the player numbers.
Yeah, that's right. Actual player numbers. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. We haven't heard anything from CCP or from Pearl Abyss, but Pearl Abyss has to react to this in next month earnings report, right? I mean, they have to mention something about it if that person is right and they're already holding talks, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the recent question that's come on from Lucas Kell, I mean, technically, Pearl Abyss has not put CCP up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
They are just looking for interested parties. I think, I mean, when all the quarterly earnings reports, there has been no questions from the analysts about, is your balance sheet getting a bit stretched? Are you getting a bit worried about the cash levels? Mm-hmm. This, though, you would hope that the analysts would pick up and go, look, what's the story here? Why are you wanting to sell it? Is it because CCP is not delivering, or is it because you are worried about the release date of Crimson Desert and you're having to get some cash in pretty quickly? Yeah, you would hope that there are some questions at the next quarterly earnings report, which is actually is it August? Is the next one?
Didn't we have one in May?
Yeah, so 3 months after that, yeah. August.
I mean, looking at the stock price is always one good indicator of what the market thinks of these rumors that come out, right? This week, the Pearl Abyss stock price, it did have a 7% jump at the beginning of the week, but it was not because of the CCP news. It was because there was a rumor that there was a release date set for Crimson Desert. Pearl Abyss then came in and denied the rumor and said it was a translation error. And in the midst of that, we saw the CCP rumors come out. And so, as far as I can tell, the CCP rumor only had a tiny bit of a positive impact on the actual stock price, which was then later kind of diluted in the wash of them denying the rumor. So it's hard to see, but it looks like overall the market had a slightly positive reaction to the news or to the rumors that CCP is looking for a buyer. And typically investors are going to see, okay, they're unloading an asset that is not generating returns. Right? That's just how the market looks at CCP.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the reason the share price rose was as you sort of say, because of the sort of misinformation that Crimson Desert was going to be released in November instead of towards the end of December. And bear in mind, the release date of Crimson Desert has been delayed or pushed back 6 times already. So it wouldn't be surprised if it slipped into 2026, which would not be good news for Pearl Abyss, because people would have to take down their numbers. And then people, I think, would start to worry. Hence why I'm sort of leaning to, this is not CCP issue, this is a Pearl Abyss issue that's sort of causing them to think about selling CCP. That said, I'm pretty sure CCP is just still not delivering to plans. So maybe if nothing happens, we still get another write down at the end of this year of the value of the business. Because I suspect that people will offer 150 million for this business, which is 50 for the debt and 100 million for the company. And Pearl Abyss has got this written in at 150. In other words, 50 million too high.
For sure. I think that's a generous estimate. Morningstar is asking, is Pearl Abyss publicly traded? Yes, they are publicly traded in Korea. They're a fairly sizable developer. Although Crimson Desert, for example, as a property itself, you can see that the release dates making the stock spike by that much, by 7% in a single day, that is an indicator how much investors are putting their hopes onto revenue generation from that property rather than CCP as a whole, which is a rather small-ish part of Pearl Abyss overall, about I think 15% or so. Having said that, though, I mean, EVE Online makes about 50, 60 million dollars in revenue every year, right? So it's nothing to sneeze at, and they'll be, if they're profitable, they're between 10 and 20% return on that. It's fine. If everything else is shut down. 50 million debt is,
and that revenue has been rising quite nicely more recently. It'll be much higher at the end of this year.
Yeah. Somebody asking, Crimson Harvest is Crimson Desert is the name of it. It's basically a it's just a new AAA title that they're bringing out. Yeah. They've changed it. It used to be an MMO. I don't think it's an MMO anymore. Okay. I think that's about wraps it up, Crod. Right? Any last words?
None at all from me. No, thank you very much for having me on.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for joining us as usual. We're gonna return to the regular stream and talk about EVE Online markets. All right. Thanks, Crod. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.